You are strong. You are powerful. You are loved. I heard these words for the first time on June 14th, 2022. I was 35 years old, and it was the day that I almost died. I grew up in a broken home. My parents were divorced, and I lived with a hole in the floor in our front room. Now, don't worry, we did cover it with a dresser, so nobody fell in. But the house was in disrepair and unsanitary. The kitchen table was covered with boxes, empty pill bottles, old mail. And at the back of the trailer, the floor was covered in a foot of trash, clothes, dishes, and dog mess. Now, this sounds deplorable and unacceptable, and it was. But my friends at the trailer park, well, they lived in a similar fashion. Dirty homes, roaches, lice, and often a single parent. So I didn't know any different. No one told me and no one showed me that my living conditions were not acceptable, that they weren't normal. No one told me there was a better way. Desperate to find love, attention, and appreciation, I became sexually active and pregnant at 14. The father of my child was older than me, wiser, and committed to our surprise family. I was one of the lucky ones. He wanted to be an active and present father. So to avoid sending him to jail, we ran away, and I disappeared for 4 years. At 15, being married was new to me. I didn't grow up with my dad, and I didn't have brothers. So living with a man and navigating his quirks was a new experience. From toilet seat negotiations to budgeting for his favorite soda and tolerating his gaming obsession, I had a lot to learn. I had dropped out of high school, so I didn't have those social experiences to lean on either. I had a lot to learn. And I was lucky because my new husband was 7 years older than me, and he had the life experience that I lacked. And he was committed to our family and helping me learn to be a perfect wife. Over the next 15 years, he stayed true to his word, and we grew a family with 5 amazing children. Being a perfect wife was not easy. Part of my expectations was to stay fit and healthy. He had a list of body expectations, and he commented on my progress frequently. He would thank me for meeting one of his goals and ask when the next one would be met. Now, his expectations were for my personal benefit, as well as the marriage, because it made me aesthetically pleasing for his viewing pleasure. Between pregnancies, I was an active athlete, running 3 miles a day, playing tennis, and swimming. I never weighed more than 128 pounds. Yet my husband was in a constant search for water pills, diet aids, and metabolism boosters. Anything to help me become toned and attractive and lose weight. I completed a triathlon when I was 25. He still told me I wasn't fit. Another frequent expectation was to take responsibility for my words and actions when they upset or angered him, which was frequent. Now, in the beginning, our fights would last about 3 hours. They consisted of yelling, name-calling, blaming, and demands for changed behavior. Now, in the beginning, I argued back, trying to get my opinion, my perspective heard. But as a 15, 16, 17-year-old girl, his volume, his energy, and frankly, his vocabulary overwhelmed me. So I would apologize, promise changes, and then we would connect physically to affirm our love. This pattern repeated itself week after week. So I learned how to quickly identify what he was angry about, adopt a meek and humble persona, apologize, and move into amends. I got our arguments down to about 30 minutes. So throughout our 15-year marriage, I always told him he was right, and I always apologized for making him angry. And in my efforts to keep the peace, I lost myself. One of our most frequent arguments was over intimacy. As his wife, it was my responsibility and duty to be available for his sexual needs every evening. He would stay up late, often gaming, and then come to bed and assume permission to take care of his sexual needs with my body. I learned to be a vessel, an object for his needs. In the beginning, I tried to resist, verbally and physically, but this only fueled his desire. And I knew the only way I could get back to sleep would be to satisfy his needs. He also had a porn addiction, and he would share his magazines with me. He would point out the various standards he had for me as seen on the models. He blamed me for his impotence, and we often shared intimacy in a dark room because I wasn't visually appealing. He never hit me, though. He put holes in the walls. He broke things, including his hand when he punched a metal door, and he threatened me regularly. Throughout our relationship, I was frequently told, if you were a man, I'd beat the shit out of you, or some variation. But he never hit me. I was one of the lucky ones. He frequently reminded me how lucky I was and that I could have it so much worse. I was frequently reminded that all relationships have problems. They all have their ups and downs. They're not always perfect. He admonished me not to share our dirty laundry because all families have problems. I don't need to talk about ours with anybody. It just isn't their business. So I didn't. I never said anything, and neither did anyone else. So I never learned different. At one point in our relationship, I was allowed to have a weekly coffee chat with the women's group from church. We met at a local coffee shop to socialize. It was something I was excited about. I didn't have any friends, and now, maybe, I could make some. I was in my early 20s and going to college full-time, and even though the students were my age, they didn't have kids. They weren't married. We didn't click. This group, they were married. They had kids. And they were older than me, which I saw as a positive. I can learn from them. I can become a better wife and mother through friendship with other wives and mothers. As I started to attend these lighthearted gatherings, I was again admonished. Don't talk about our problems. Don't talk about our relationship. It's none of their business. So I sat in the booth, ordered my sweet potato fries, and mostly stayed quiet. No one really asked why. There was one evening I remember distinctly. A young woman was about to be married. At the end of the evening, we all went outside and we circled around her in a gesture of love and support. One at a time, each of the women shared a bit of wisdom from their relationship. It was encouraging. It was a little funny. It was one of my favorite memories. But I didn't give her advice. I was scared for her. I wanted to warn her against what I couldn't really put into words. But I knew marriage was hard, and it required sacrificing yourself in service of your husband. And I didn't want that for her. But I wouldn't discourage her days before her wedding. So I stayed quiet. Perhaps they thought I was shy, or boring, or socially ignorant. I'll never know what they thought, but I know they never knew the truth because they never asked. I was 1,000% committed to being the perfect wife. I knew for certain that our problems, the threats, the name calling, the neglect, the abuse, was my fault. If only I was the perfect wife, all these bad things would stop. If I was better, he would treat me better. So we eventually went to marriage counseling. The goal was simple: allow a neutral third party to observe our relationship and establish the fact that I was bipolar. So I could finally get help, finally get on medication. Throughout our marriage, he claimed I was bipolar. Now, he had no medical degree and no experience with this disorder, but he affirmed it every time I cried, I got upset, or I became angry with him. So I needed help, and I wouldn't listen to him, so we called in the experts. We tried multiple counselors over a period of about 2 years. There was one moment in particular, that started raising my awareness. We met with a priest who was a licensed marriage counselor, and my husband and I sat in chairs facing each other that were about 10 feet apart. The priest asked me to say one thing that was hurting me. I decided to talk about the demand to be fit and thin. I said very plainly, he, my husband, tells me I'm fat. The priest walked over to my husband and quite bluntly, "Why would you lie to this woman?" The veil started to lift. But that counselor moved away. Now, we tried other counselors, but they all dismissed us. Some said our situation was too complicated and they made a referral. Others implied our problems weren't really problems. No one made time to hear us, to hear me. So things stayed the same. After 14 years, I discovered that my husband was having an emotional affair online with a woman from Norway. Now, this woman was very thin, very young, and very pretty. She was also anorexic. The consequence of not being thin enough or tone enough was my husband choosing to devote his time and affections to another woman. I was the reason for the affair. What was left of my self-esteem and strength faded away. And in January of 2015, I became anorexic. I guess I was tired of being told I was too fat, had too many stretch marks, and failing to embody his standards. I was desperate to stop the name-calling, the blaming, and the one-sided sexual interactions. I was tired of being told I was the problem. So I lost my appetite for food. The sight of food made me sick to my stomach, and I was mentally unable to eat. I lost 18 pounds in 3 weeks and dropped to my lowest at 109 pounds. By March of 2015, nothing had changed. And my husband came to me with an idea: cosmetic surgery. Now, this was for my own self-esteem. Looking better physically would improve my self-image and therefore my attitude. He said it was my choice. I didn't believe him. I was desperate to save my marriage. So I said yes, and had elective surgery and an attempt to finally make him happy and save our marriage. Now, recovery was more challenging than either of us anticipated, and we had small children. There was one night he came into the room angry. I don't remember why, but I know he wanted me to get out of bed. We argued, grabbed my arm, and pulled me out of bed. Those muscles never healed right, and nothing changed. I finally left in December of 2015, and I began recovering. But as I sought healing through therapy and support groups, I was told time and time again that I was doing just fine. I was told I was handling the separation and the mental healing just fine, and there was no reason for me to be there. So I didn't continue therapy. For the next 5 years, I lived with my girlfriend, a fellow educator. She loved her job, and she loved my kids, and I believe she loved me. She despised conflict and did everything to avoid it. I was terrified of conflict and did everything to avoid it. So it was peaceful. It was a welcome reprieve from the name-calling, the aggression, and the constant reminder that I was a disappointment. It gave me space to just exist. And so I did. During this time of peace, I found myself unable to exercise due to pervasive negative self-talk. I was highly sensitive to innocent comments about the food I was choosing to eat. But on bad days, I could call home and use a code word to say I was struggling. My days became extremely routine, with low demands and expectations. I went to work, I came home, I visited my kids. The courts sided with my husband, but that's another story. Without judgment or demands, my mind went through a sort of reboot. The awful voices quieted. After 2 years, eating and exercising became comfortable. After 4 years, I was feeling emotionally stable. I was getting into a healthy routine of eating and exercising, and I was smiling more. But I wasn't growing. I wasn't becoming a better person. I was just there. At the end of 2020, I decided to become independent and untethered. I was confident. I knew what I wanted from life. I was ready to start working on me. I had no idea that I wasn't healed. And in March of 2021, I unfortunately got into another relationship with an abusive man who made me wish I was still married to my ex-husband. But I didn't have the strength to leave. This was normal, right? It was normal to be constantly disappointing your partner, to be told you make a horrible wife and no one would ever put up with you. It was normal to be yelled at, called names, and have objects broken or destroyed out of anger. It was normal to provide sexual satisfaction to your partner, regardless of your personal interest. After about a year with this man, I fell into a deep depression. So he treated me to a mini vacation out of town. It was on this trip that he sexually assaulted me. I crumpled into a corner and I cried, a chaotic mix of emotions coursing through me, trying to find the words to express and understand what he had just done. He decided to call the police. I remember it was a very cold night, and they interviewed us separately, him outside the hotel room and me inside. The decision was to send me to the hospital for a psych eval because I was the crazy one. I spent the night in the ER, scared, alone, and fighting a really weird mix of emotions. And the next morning, I had to drive back to Houston with him. He made sure to tell me how lucky I was that he didn't leave me in another city. He drove me home. I developed PTSD after that event, and I left him. Despite not telling him where I lived, he found out, and he started leaving notes on my door, emailing and texting me ugly messages, and threatening to message my entire social media list and tell them what a whore I am. He had people follow me, and then he would email me the next day with what I was wearing to tell me he was always watching. He came to my work looking for me. So I did what any rational, scared woman would do. I filed a restraining order. I collected my evidence, texts, voice recordings, emails. I went and I did the process, and on June 14th, 2022, my restraining order was denied. This sent a very powerful message to me, that what I was going through was normal. There was nothing wrong with what he was doing. This was just the way life was lived. I made a decision that night. I decided that I was not going to live that way anymore. I refused to live another minute, let alone 30 years, under the scrutiny and emotional abuse of others. If this was normal, I wanted no part of it. So I decided to take my own life. I started drinking all the liquor in my cabinet as fast as I could. This was the end. I was not going to fail. I was well on my way to an empty cabinet when a friend came by to visit me. I'd only known him a few weeks, and we'd only shared a few short conversations. He came into the room, and he saw me on the floor, barely able to move. I was angry. I was determined to finish what I had started. He sat beside me. I begged him to leave and let me die. I demanded that he get out of my house as I reached for another bottle. But he sat beside me, and he said the words, "You are strong, you are powerful, you are loved." He told me to repeat them. I am strong, I am powerful, I am loved. It was the first time I said them. These words were so foreign, so strange, that I didn't believe them. I fought them. I denied them. I refused to accept them. But he just kept repeating them and kept asking me to say them too. You are strong. I am strong. You are powerful. I am powerful. You are loved. I am loved. My tortured soul died that night. I woke from the nightmare I had lived, and I was determined to become strong, powerful, and loved. This journey has not been easy. I've had to fight the voices in my head, reminding me where I've been, reminding me that every mistake made me unlovable. Every meal made me unattractive, and every word I spoke made me ignorant. But I had a new mantra in my ear. Every day there was someone in my corner reminding me I am strong, powerful, and loved. Even when I couldn't say it myself, and I struggled to believe it, those words were there. Throughout my life, I've been taught many truths, and many of them were false. It was a false truth that I was lucky to be in an abusive marriage. It was a false truth that it was my duty as a woman and a wife to meet every single need of my husband. It was a false truth that I wasn't thin enough or fit enough to be treated with respect. My false truth was that I was a powerless woman who had no voice and no choice and needed to sit in the corner until my husband called for me. No one knew these false truths living in my head. And because I didn't have a role model or a situation to compare my own to, my false truth was the only truth. We all have truths that guide our lives, beliefs we hold about ourselves. When you meet another person, what truths are they living by? What truths are you living by? When we see someone, we have an opportunity to share true truths. How often do we see someone and forget to tell them, "You're strong," or "I'm inspired by you," or "I see you, you're amazing"? My inner voice used to mimic my husband, find and criticize every flaw, insult and bully me in the mirror. I would ask myself, why are you so awful? Why can't you just stop eating or stop complaining or just be happy all the time? I didn't know how to see myself any different. I used to call myself names when I exercised, and it was the negativity that spurred me to run one more block, one more mile. Through therapy, my current relationship, and a lot of books, articles, and podcasts, I have learned to empower myself and my inner voice. When I choose to exercise, my inner voice says, "You're strong, you got this." And sometimes it comforts me. Stopping doesn't make you weak. You're hurting. It's okay to rest. When I walk into a room or an event, I feel equal to those who are already there. I have a voice now. I have experiences, insight, and wisdom to offer. I am valuable to the people and the space I am entering. I usually have the confidence to walk up to someone and start a conversation. I'm still working on that one. Now, day to day, for the most part, I am able to speak plainly about my physical, emotional, and psychological needs. I give myself permission to walk away from situations that are uncomfortable or damaging. And I finally feel safe at night. Throughout my marriage, everyone saw a growing family, a meek wife, and a husband that stayed. No one asked me how things were at home. No one told me I was strong or powerful or loved. That 16-year-old girl getting prepped for a C-section, she looked strong. That 22-year-old college graduate, magna cum laude, she looked powerful. That wife of 14 years smiling in all the pictures, she looked loved. But she was broken, convinced that she was living the life she was meant to have. That girl is still inside me. There are days I still struggle to look in the mirror. Days I struggle to make my voice heard. Days I wonder if I'm smart enough, wise enough to make a difference. But now, I have a stronger voice and a community that stands beside me. There are men and women I now call friends. People I can call on for advice, small talk, that last-minute Friendsgiving. People I would be happily stuck on a cruise with. We just need to book it. It's because of those people, their friendship, their encouragement, and their support that I stand before you today. And I say, I am strong. I am powerful. I am loved.
Great. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your story and for being so brave and for sharing how you were able to turn something so low and so dark and so hard for you into something so beautiful. And you are strong and you are powerful and you are loved. And thank you very much for doing that today. I'm really glad that I heard her story a couple times before this because I wasn't able to talk the last time I heard her talk. So I can close for all of you today, and I hope that you all take, if nothing else, from that story that you also are strong and powerful and loved right here in Inspired Leaders, right here in this community, and every day in your life. come back and join us next month with Miss Elaine Roberts is going to be speaking. You can scan that QR code. It takes you right to our Facebook event for next month. It's just a real easy click going, and you guys are all welcome to come. Bring a friend. Enjoy the networking, the stories, and all the growth that you experience here at Inspired Leaders. I hope that you guys have the best Valentine's Day. What a perfect day to get a perfect message from Monique. And I hope that you all know that we love you so much, and we're so honored to spend our days with you. And please come back again. Have a good weekend.